still in the middle of fighting in the Dara and Tufa area, with lower intensity fighting still going on. In other areas of the north, we are in full operational control.
The IDF says it struck Hamas headquarters and eliminated militants in southern Gaza City in the last 24 hours. It also claims to have located a number of shafts leading to a significant underground tunnel route with the help of its K9 unit. Israel claims this route was used as an underground base by Hamas. It is also alleged to have been used for storage, hideouts, command and control, and movement of militants between different areas. The cost of the war is also increasing. Death of a 73-year-old U.S.-Israeli hostage, Gad Haggai, has been announced by his kibbutz community. Haggai was thought to be held in Gaza, but was actually killed on the day of the attack, the community said, adding his body had been taken to Gaza. U.S. President Joe Biden says he's heartbroken by reports of Haggai's death.
The much anticipated UNSC vote on a resolution to try and increase aid into the Gaza Strip is expected to happen today. The resolution will call for more efforts to ensure a sustainable cessation of hostilities rather than for a cessation of hostilities. This is what the Americans are in fact playing for. The earlier resolutions had called either for cessation of hostilities or for a temporary pause. Now, both the United States and Israel have in fact been opposed to the term ceasefire, which is why the present wording of the resolution is expected to find favor with the United States. Meanwhile, the Israeli forces continue to deepen their incursion into the Gaza Strip. The United Nations has said that the Israel-Hamas war is now pushing the Palestinian enclave into a famine. The ground reality in the Gaza Strip is very grim. Israeli strikes on a house in Rafah have killed at least about 5 people on Friday. In the last 24 hours, the Israeli army has struck about 230 targets in Gaza. Now, the IDF has also released a video showing alleged Hamas tunnels being destroyed in the Gaza Strip. The Palestinian authorities have said that the conflict has now resulted in over 20,000 Palestinians getting killed. The WHO has said that there are simply no functional hospitals in northern part of the Gaza Strip. Out of a population of 2.3 to 2.4 million people, as many as about 1.9 million Gazans have been displaced after they've been uprooted from their homes. Communication lines are being repeatedly cut as well by the Israelis.
وهذا يعني امر محزن، امر مخيب للامال. لا نتحدث عن اتفاقيه جنيف واتفاقيه القانون الانساني والدولي، انت تتحدث عن اطفال اوكرانيا واطفال اسرائيل واطفال فلسطينيين. لعل الجرم الذي يستشهد من اجله انهم اطفال فلسطين، او لا يعتبر اطفال اسرائيل او اوكرانيا او امريكا، ولكن وقف العالم كله وقفه واحده ودعا الى وقف فوري لاطلاق النار. يحجب قتل الاطفال الابرياء والمدنيين العزل الذين لا علاقه لهم في النزاع او في الحرب او في المشاكل بين إسرائيل وفلسطين.
The Gazans are in fact struggling for food, water, fuel and medicines. A UN Secretary General spokesperson has said that relentless strikes have prevented aid trucks from entering through the Kerem Shalom. The World Food Programme has also suspended its operations at the crossing. The crossing was opened on the 15th of December to allow some aid to trickle into the Gaza Strip. But experts say that this aid that is coming to the Gaza Strip is nothing more than a drop in the ocean. Meanwhile, in the diplomatic arena, the UK's Foreign Secretary has said in Egypt that everything must be done to try and get aid into the Gaza Strip. French President Emmanuel Macron met with the Jordanian king to discuss the humanitarian and medical aid for Gaza. Even as the deadlock continues in a truce, Hamas, at this moment, is said to be in custody of about 129 Israeli hostages. Israel claims it will continue this war until Hamas is wiped out, while Hamas has now made the cessation of hostilities a precondition for further release of Israeli hostages. Remember, as many as about 105 Israeli hostages had been swapped for 240 Palestinian prisoners in the earlier hostage deal.
Well, at our focus, Israel could be considering to allow the Palestinian Authority, which currently governs the West Bank, to rule Gaza after the war, an idea that Israel's strongest ally, United States, has been pushing. Now, Israel's acceptance has been indicated by Israel's National Security Advisor. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu so far had been categorically rejecting this suggestion. But his NSA's words could be seen as the latest sign that the Biden administration's pressure could be affecting Israeli Prime Minister's decision. Now, in an opinion piece written for an Arabic language news site, Israel's NSA Zachi Hanebi wrote, and I quote here, "Beyond ensuring the security of our citizens, which will not compromise on Israel, has no interest in controlling civil affairs in Gaza, and there will be need to be a moderate Palestinian governing body that enjoys broad support and legitimacy." He added Israel is ready to make an effort in this regard. Netanyahu has repeatedly rejected that post-war Gaza should be run by the Palestinian Authority. He says it represents as much of a security threat to Israel as Hamas. But Hanegbi has indicated that a Palestinian Authority that undertakes fundamental reforms might be acceptable to Israel. In his write-up, he mentioned reforms that include a focus on the duty to raise the young generation without incitement to violence against Israel. Biden administration officials are pressing the Palestinian Authority to undertake major reforms so that it can govern Gaza after the war. Now, these include dismissal of its aging leadership, setting a timeline for elections, and overhauling its security force. Palestinian officials and Arab governments are insisting that a lasting ceasefire is necessary in Gaza before they agree to discuss any post-war arrangements. While Hanegbi wrote the opinion, a senior Israeli official has said his words are misunderstood. This as per the reports in Israeli media. Speaking off record, the official denied that Israel is considering Palestinian authorities' rule in Gaza. The official also said that Israel is interested in reaching a new hostage release agreement first, but that there are no active negotiations at present.
So Israeli forces are now said to be widening their ground offensive in central Gaza at this moment as we speak. The renewed push comes just ahead of a key United Nations Security Council vote to increase aid into the Gaza Strip to avert a potential famine. Hopes are also fading for a new truce deal with literally no breakthrough happening in the talks. Now, the United Arab Emirates was in fact trying to avoid a US veto for its United Nations Security Council resolution draft. The resolution would demand that Israel and Hamas should allow the use of all land, sea and air routes throughout the entire Gaza Strip for humanitarian aid deliveries. After weeks of talks and negotiations, the vote has been delayed and the vote by the Security Council was put off again for Friday. This despite the US saying that it could now support an amended proposal. Now, earlier in the day, the Israeli forces fired tear gas near the Al-Aqsa compound, and this is in the West Bank. This is the place where there is no Hamas whatsoever. The Al-Aqsa compound is the third holiest site in Islam, where the Palestinians, of course, gather for prayers every day. And today, of course, was a big day because it was the occasion of Friday prayers. The people were seen running from the riot police when the tear gas was fired at the crowd of people who in fact gathered at the Al-Aqsa Mosque on the occasion of Friday prayers. The mounted police also charged at a group that was trying to run away. In addition to the ground offensive that began on the 20th of October, the Israeli airstrikes and artillery bombardment continued on the Gaza Strip all through the day.
כוחותינו ממשיכים להעמיק את הפעילות הקרקעית בצפון עזה ובדרומה. מאז סיום ההפוגה בפעולה הקרקעית בעזה, כוחותינו חיסלו יותר מ-2,000 מחבלים מהאוויר, מהים ומהיבשה.
Now, talking about the Israeli offensive in the Gaza Strip, there is fresh analysis that shows that Israel has dropped hundreds of massive bombs capable of killing and wounding people over 1,000 feet away in the very first month of the war. Satellite imagery from the early days of the war reveals 500 impact craters that are said to be at least about 12 meters in diameter, consistent with those that have been left behind by the 2,000-pound bombs that the Israelis have been using regularly in this campaign. And they've been dropping these 2,000-pound bombs in some of the most densely populated neighborhoods anywhere in the world. For comparison, these bombs are said to be 4 times heavier than the largest bombs that the United States had dropped in Iraq in its war against the ISIS. And experts have blamed the extensive use of very heavy ammunition, such as the 2,000-pound bombs, for the death toll that has now run to tens of thousands in Gaza. Remember, at this moment as we speak, over 20,000 Palestinians have been massacred in this campaign of relentless bombing that Israel has carried out. And nearly about 70% of all those being killed are said to be women and children. Israel has flattened swathes of densely populated neighborhoods in Gaza. It has razed down complete neighborhoods to rubble in its campaign of indiscriminate bombing. And Israel says that it is going after Hamas. But looking at the scale of devastation there, lots of questions have been asked as to why Israel has not used precision strikes and has instead resorted to this scale of bombings, where it is the civilians who seem to be paying the ultimate price. The soaring death toll in the Gaza Strip has also drawn international criticism, even from some of the most staunchest allies of Israel, such as the United States. The Israeli military has expressed regret for the civilian deaths, but it has blamed Hamas for operating out of densely populated areas and using civilians as human shields. But even then, questions have been asked as to why Israel has dropped 2,000-pound bombs in some of the most densely populated neighborhoods, like, for instance, in the Jabalia refugee camp. Now, Israel has admitted that about 140 of its soldiers have been ambushed and killed during its ground incursion so far. All right, now to give us more perspective in terms of what, of course, is expected to happen at the United Nations later this evening today, which will, of course, be morning in New York, we're being joined by Dr. Gilbert Doctorow, who's joining us live from Brussels. Dr. Doctorow is an international affairs analyst, an author and an historian. Dr. Doctorow, this of course is a crucial moment in the war. The death toll has gone past 20,000 in the Gaza Strip. And what is interesting is that the UNSC is expected to vote on increased humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip. But this is a vote that's been delayed 4 times already. Why do you think that is so?
The main question was to change the nature of the resolution that was brought to the UN by the United Arab Emirates, which called originally for a ceasefire. That was totally unacceptable. The United States rejected such a resolution twice, and the wording of what exactly the resolution could provide has been the subject of debate for this delayed period of 3 days that you mentioned. Finally, where we stand, the idea of a ceasefire has been dismissed entirely from the language. We have the question of increased humanitarian assistance. And there the blocking point is, raised by Israel, that they participate in inspecting all the incoming international aid. That is, by the estimation of the United Nations people, by the estimation of the Egyptians, who are whose border with Palestine, with Gaza, is the main transit point for any incoming aid. These agencies in Egypt and the United Nations believe that Israeli participation will vastly slow down any aid transport that's coming in. I was interested to see your mention in your narrative on the status of the war, that there's discussion, or at least there was the hope, that all avenues of transport would be utilized to bring in the aid, including, as you mentioned, Sea. There is a very topical question, because right now the other big issue in the war is the possible escalation, regionalization of it with respect to the Houthis' attacks on shipping in the Red Sea. And that is precisely the issue.
Right.
The freedom of the seas. So
I'll come to the issue of the freedom of seas and what is happening at this moment in the Red Sea. But the question that I think a lot of people are baffled about is that there seems to be debate and discussion about increased aid deliveries into the Gaza Strip. There are 2.3 million people who've been denied access to food, water and electricity. Should it even be a matter of debate as to whether they should be sent more aid at a time when they've been living in a blockade for well over 2.5 months now?
If it were a just world, then what you say would obtain. However, we're not living in a just world. We're living in a world that is dominated by force, and Israel is behaving as if it were the United States. Over the last 30 years, the United States has gotten away with murder, literally, in campaigns in a number of countries in West Asia, and Israel believes that it can do the same thing. However, the United States never had a case brought before the International Criminal Court for war crimes, and Israel just has. South Africa has filed the papers, and I believe that is going to be very interesting to follow, to how quickly the court will act and whether it will have any bearing on Israel's further conduct. But that the bombing, the starvation, and the pure obstinacy and violence of Israel's government with respect to Gaza is, you've mentioned it in the lead up to our interview. I fully agree with what you've said. And the amazing thing is that even CNN, even BBC, even Euronews, which are generally following the policy lines of the United States, have been as open as you are in showing to their viewers the tragedy that Israel is wreaking in Gaza.
Because in a world where everyone has access to social media, there's literally nothing that can be hidden, and this is what has happened with the case of the legacy media. But coming to the issue of the freedom of navigation in the Red Sea, the Houthis say that they are targeting ships that are bound for Israel. How much of a concern is that going to be for the Israelis? Because according to reports that are now being filed, it now says that nearly 85% of traffic in the Red Sea that was headed towards the port of Eilat in southern Israel has now been affected because of the Houthis firing missiles and drones at ships that are headed towards Israel. Do you think that will have any bearing on this war?
Oh, it already has bearing on the war. It is the question, will this be regionalized or globalized? The effectiveness of the Houthi action has been much greater than you suggest by speaking about the transport heading straight to Israel. The whole of international container shipping has not accepted yet the United States' plan of assured prosperity in a naval force to provide safe passage to commercial shipping. The insurers do not support that. And so the effect on global shipping and the disposition of containers is greatly affected. But I raised the question of the Red Sea and shipping and freedom of the seas because exactly the same issue can be raised with respect to Israel's behavior off the Gaza coast. There is the blockage on Gaza is not only on land routes, it's on sea as well. And this is in violation of international rules of maritime.
I think you've summed it up beautifully there. Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Gilbert Doctorow, for joining us and getting us that perspective there.
My pleasure.
Israel could be considering to allow the Palestinian Authority, which currently governs West Bank, to rule Gaza after the war. An idea that Israel's strongest ally, US, has been pushing. And Israel's acceptance has been indicated by Israel's national security advisor. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu so far had been categorically rejecting this suggestion, but his NSA's words could be seen as the latest sign that Biden administration's pressure could be affecting Israeli Prime Minister's decision. In an opinion piece written for an Arabic language news site, Israel's NSA wrote, and I quote, "Beyond ensuring the security of our citizens, which we will not compromise on, Israel has no interest in controlling civil affairs in Gaza, and there will need to be a moderate Palestinian governing body that enjoys broad support and legitimacy." He added, Israel is ready to make an effort in this regard. Now, Netanyahu has repeatedly rejected that post-war Gaza should be run by the Palestinian Authority. In fact, he says that it represents as much of a security threat to Israel as Hamas. But Henrik Bey has indicated that a Palestinian Authority that undertakes fundamental reforms might be acceptable to Israel. And in his write-up, he mentioned reforms that include a focus on duty to raise the young generation without incitement to violence against Israel. Biden administration officials are pressing the Palestinian Authority to undertake major reforms so that it can govern Gaza after war. And these include dismissal of its aging leadership, setting a timetable for elections, and overhauling its security force. Palestinian officials and Arab governments are insisting that a lasting ceasefire is necessary in Gaza before they agree to any discussion on post-war arrangements. Now, while Henrik Bey wrote the opinion, a senior Israeli official has said that his words are misunderstood, and this as per reports in Israeli media. Speaking off record, the official denied that Israel is considering Palestinian Authority's rule in Gaza, and also said that Israel is interested in reaching a new hostage release agreement first, but that there are no active negotiations at present.
We now shift focus to West Asia. Fighting escalated in Gaza during the last 24 hours itself. The area saw some of the heaviest bombardment, while Hamas is still being able to launch salvo of rockets towards Israel as well. Escalation is taking place amid some serious efforts towards a renewed ceasefire deal. Hamas chief Ismail Haniyeh was in Egypt for a second day of negotiations on Thursday. However, Hamas and other Palestinian factions have taken a unanimous approach that another hostage and prisoner exchange would take place only when fighting stops in Gaza. Israeli Foreign Minister Eli Cohen confirmed negotiations on a hostage release were ongoing but declined to provide any further details on this. The Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, has once again said that Israel will fight till victory.
הברירה שאני מציע לחמאס היא מאוד פשוטה, להיכנע או למות. אין ולא תהיה להם שום ברירה אחרת.
Now, Israel says it has destroyed a strategic terror tunnel network in central Gaza City. The Israeli army has released a video showing a tunnel being blown up by its forces. It also said the network of tunnels was destroyed in a controlled manner. Another Israeli army footage from northern Gaza shows troops engaging suspected militants in Shijaya neighborhood of Gaza City after days of intense fighting here. Army says it has established operational control over the neighborhood. The IDF says that in Jabalia, the soldiers enabled the orderly evacuation of the civilian population from a school complex. The IDF said ground troops conducted searches in the school and located numerous weapons as well. Hamas said that an Israeli strike killed the head of the Palestinian side of the newly reopened Kerem Shalom border crossing on Thursday, along with 3 more people. After weeks of pressure, Israel approved the temporary reopening of Kerem Shalom on December 15th to enable direct aid deliveries to Gaza rather than through the Rafah crossing from Egypt. Now, Israeli officials have not commented yet on the accusations, while the United Nations Human Rights Office has said it had received reports that Israeli troops summarily killed at least 11 unarmed Palestinians in Gaza. It said that the incident raises alarm about the possible commission of a war crime. Israeli army claims that it has killed 2,000 militants in Gaza this month. Hamas says fighting, of course, the ongoing war has killed over 20,000 Palestinians so far. Israeli strikes have been hitting civilian areas and Gaza hospitals are now overwhelmed. Now, these are the visuals from Rafah in southern Gaza. The moment was captured when a journalist reporting live was just meters away from the scene of airstrikes hitting several buildings close to a hospital in the area. The journalist then took cover while the cameraman filmed the entire situation. And all this is happening while several leaders are engaging in talks for a respite in the war. British Foreign Secretary David Cameron is in Egypt, where he repeated his call for a sustainable ceasefire where Hamas is no longer able to threaten Israel. Then French President Emmanuel Macron arrived in Jordan to discuss with King Abdullah about humanitarian and medical aid to Gaza, while the UAE Foreign Minister met a senior Palestinian Authority official in Abu Dhabi, where they discussed international efforts to achieve a ceasefire in Gaza.
And in other global news, uncertainty looms over a new ceasefire deal in the ongoing Israel-Hamas war. Well, Hamas chief Ismail Haniyeh's visit to Egypt and Mossad chief's engagement with other officials for the talks, these are being seen as a positive sign. However, both the sides have again indicated that a new agreement right now might be off the table. Hamas has reportedly rejected an Israeli proposal for a week-long truce, as it has insisted for Israel to implement a ceasefire before negotiations. But Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has meanwhile vowed to continue with the war and eliminate Hamas. Take a listen.
We are continuing the war to the end. It will continue until Hamas is eliminated, until victory. Whoever thinks that we will stop is detached from reality. We will not stop the fighting until all of the goals that we have set are achieved. The elimination of Hamas, the release of our hostages, and the removal of the threat from Gaza. We are continuing the war to the end. It will continue until Hamas is eliminated, until victory. Whoever thinks that we will stop is detached from reality. We will not stop the fighting until all of the goals that we have set are achieved. The elimination of Hamas, the release of our hostages, and the removal of the threat from Gaza.
Well, U.S. President Joe Biden also said that the country is pushing for a new deal. However, it is not expected soon. Meanwhile, a United Nations Security Council vote on Gaza has again been delayed for third day straight. This as Biden says that the U.S. support for the resolution is still unresolved. Well, the U.S. diplomats are working out to agree on the language of the draft resolution, calling for a halt in fighting and major increase in aid supplies to Gaza. Well, Israel, on the other hand, has expanded its fight in Gaza. The Israeli military says that troops are now also fighting in the Tufa and the Daraj neighborhood of the Gaza city. Israel has released footage of a vast tunnel network they uncovered in Gaza that it says were used by Hamas leaders. The RDF say that these tunnels were uncovered from the properties registered to Yahya Sinwar and other senior Hamas organizers of the October 7th attack. While the Israeli onslaught continues in southern Gaza At least 12 people have died. They've been killed in the Israeli strikes in Rafah in the last 24 hours, while dozens were wounded. Meanwhile, Yemen's Houthis have threatened the United States to attack its warships operating in the region. And this in response